Howdy folks, Rambashlings here. Lately, I have been thinking a lot about Bleach. It was my first shonen manga, and honestly, my gateway into anime as a whole. I would be an extremely different person if my middle school friend didn't introduce me to Bleach. Now that I'm well out of my school years, however, I don't really read manga or watch anime at all. Part of this is simply because I have a full-time job and numerous hobbies, such as making these videos, which means I have little free time and I'd rather use it in other ways. The other part of this is that on paper, shonen battle mangas, such as Bleach, One Piece, and My Hero Academia, are made for me. I love it when stories are generally light-hearted but have darker elements. I love power of friendship narratives and stories that have ensemble casts. I love action, especially when there's a fictional magic system or superpowers, for example, involved. All of those things are like narrative catnip to me. But I have not particularly enjoyed any shonen manga that follows this formula in a long time. In fact, I ended up dropping most of the series I enjoyed when I was a teenager, such as Naruto and One Piece, and I bounced off series such as My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen when I tried to get into them. Part of this is simply due to the fact that I, as a 30-year-old lesbian, am very much not shonen manga's target audience. It is generally too male-centric and heterosexual for my adult self's tastes. This comment is not a criticism, it is shrimply a fact of life. What is a criticism, however, is now that I am older and wiser, I think that most of these shonen battle mangas are honestly kind of bad. Now, they don't tend to start this way. I really enjoy most of Bleach up until the time skip, and same for Naruto, honestly. In fact, 90% of the shonen battle mangas I have read start off strong, have a middling middle, and then fall apart at the end. And there is a reason for this. Namely, shonen power scaling freaking sucks and almost always ends up undermining the themes of the work. To understand why and how the issues with power scaling occur, we first need to look at the conditions these mangas are made in. Weekly Shonen Jump mangas tend to start with a 40 to 50 page introductory chapter, and then they release 15 to 20 page chapters each week. Even with the help of assistants, that is a hell of a lot of pages. If you Google mangaka schedule sheet, you will get some disturbing results. Kubo finished Bleach with a serious repetitive strain-induced injury, and Kishimoto, Naruto's mangaka, has been hospitalized before due to overwork, and these are just two examples of the health issues that frequently plague mangaka. Next, we need to look at the purpose of these mangas. It is not to tell a story, at least not to the publishers. No, the reason shonen battle mangas exist is to earn sweet cash. Now, keep those facts in mind as I talk about the stories themselves. The vast majority of shonen battle manga follow the same formula. There is a protagonist who is almost always a teenage boy who has something that differentiates him from the people around him. It's not necessarily in a good way, but it is almost certainly in a way that gives them martial prowess. After an inciting incident occurs, which frequently involves the main character being attacked by a low-level thug, the main character awakens these powers, kicking off the start of the story. On the way, he picks up a group of peers who either quickly or eventually become his true companions. These stories almost always have themes of friendship, teamwork, kindness and forgiveness, and improving yourself via effort. As time goes on, however, the circumstances these manga are created in catch up to them. Speaking as a creative, albeit one who works in very different circumstances, I've discovered that over the years, if you want to create a well-paced, cohesive story that isn't filled to the brim with plot holes and is also emotionally satisfying, you cannot just wing it. You need to plan. And I believe a lot of the mangaka of these shonens have at bare minimum an idea of how they want to start their story, along with maybe a vague direction about where they want the story to go. Hence why the beginnings tend to be tight. Once they hit the area where they haven't really planned things out, however, there's no time or space for them to actually do so, at least not thoroughly. Because they have to churn out a chapter for this week, and then think of a chapter for next week. There's literally no room in their schedule for them to contemplate the nitty-gritty details of the events of, say, 50 chapters from then, which is what they need to be doing to ensure the quality of the work doesn't slip. Instead, they have to throw in bullshit at the last second and pray that it lands. Even if a mangaka does start their series with a thorough plan of the entire story, that can also get completely derailed if the publishers and editors tell them to do something else, which happens, and quite frequently at that, since remember, the publishers don't care about making a good story. A side character gets absurdly popular? Well, they have to get screen time now, even if it comes at the expense of either pacing or another actual main character's growth. The author has reached a good conclusion to the story, wrapping up all of the main threads. They need to make an extra 200 chapters now because the story is just too popular to end. And these are the conditions that inevitably lead to the mangaka falling into the power scaling trap. Because the path to this problem is fairly benign. Let's go back to our story example. Our plucky protagonist and his merry band of friends have defeated the first major antagonist, the first step in their journey to defeating the ultimate big bad. The authors can't throw this ultimate big bad at the main characters immediately, however, because these series are long runners. And the mangaka might also just not know who this ultimate evil even is. So instead, they throw the next antagonist at the heroes, and by default, this antagonist has to be stronger than the previous one, because otherwise, where are the stakes? So, the cycle begins. Bad guy is defeated, new, stronger bad guy appears. And the longer the cycle continues, the more perilous it becomes, because it increases the likelihood that the conditions most shonen mangakas work in will catch up to them. Whether it's due to editors wanting more and more hype, or the mangaka writing themselves into a hole because they need a chapter done ASAP, they will introduce a bad guy who begins to break the story. The power of friendship and hard work themes are normally the first casualties, because a bad guy will inevitably be introduced who is simply too strong for the main character's plucky friends to keep up with. Yet this time, hard work cannot make these characters relevant again, because there's only so much screen time, and it has to go to the popular dudes, not the ones who actually need the growth. The less traditionally cool characters officially get power scaled into irrelevance at this point, and the benefits of hard work die with them. That's not even the worst thing, however. No. If an author has to rely on this crutch, they will inevitably be forced to introduce a villain who breaks not just the themes, but the power scaling itself. Someone who is so strong, there is no possible way to defeat them in the framework the series has established to that point, and this leaves the mangaka with no good escape routes. They have two choices. Firstly, they can up the power levels in general, which runs the risk of destroying the world building by making all the characters the narrative has previously touted as powerful actually just kind of average in the grand scheme of things. Still, while that's bad, it's not bad enough to kill a story. Alas, that option doesn't tend to work forever in these cases, because as long as a series runs, the publishers will always want more. No, eventually, the mangaka will be forced into taking option 2, the Deus Ex Machina, the random power-up that comes out of nowhere just because. The reveal that the main character has a super special secret bloodline, the random super weapon, or convoluted fatal flaw with the antagonist's powers that has clearly been added since there was no other way of defeating them. No matter what it is, these inevitably and irreversibly make the manga worse. The random power-up or last-minute bullshitted weaknesses were never meant to be part of a story to begin with, so the build-up for them inevitably sucks and the end results feel unrewarding. The special bloodline plot destroys any hard work themes, replacing them with a "you'll succeed only if you were born great" message, which is a terrible moral in any story. And, at its endpoint, it leaves all characters but the main lead too weak to be relevant in a battle manga. A manga about fighting. If you look at most shonen battle mangas, the most popular fight is rarely against the final villain. For example, Byakuya vs Ichigo, a battle that occurs around roughly chapter 160 in Bleach, is generally viewed as one of the best, if not the best fight in the series, which is roughly 700 chapters long. And this is because it's not overwhelming power that makes a fight scene good. It's tension, which doesn't exist in any battles where someone is inevitably just going to pull some nonsense out of their arse. It's in the character exploration that happens during the fight, and the development it gives both the hero and the villain, which doesn't happen if the fight does nothing but undermine the story's themes. It's in a satisfying conclusion, where after shedding blood, sweat, and tears, the heroes narrowly earn a victory, which doesn't happen if they had to win via the author's intervention. Look at Ichigo vs Byakuya. It's the end point of a rivalry the series has spent a lot of time building up. It's the first time the audience is seeing Ichigo's newest power-up, which is another thing the series has been building up to for ages. But while that power-up helps close the gap between them, Byakuya is still a menacing opponent who is significantly stronger and more experienced than Ichigo. Ichigo's inner dark side, which yet again has been built up in the background for a long time, helps even the odds a bit, but it doesn't win him the fight. In fact, by the time the battle concludes, Ichigo is in a far worse state physically than Byakuya. No, Ichigo's ultimate victory occurs here not because he's a prodigy who overpowered Byakuya, but because he won the ideological fight. He stuck to his convictions, while Byakuya wavered, which weakened the latter at a critical time. If you haven't guessed, I'm going to be talking about Bleach spoilers a little bit here, so skip forward to the timestamp shown on screen if you want to skip those. In contrast, looking at the final fight versus Yahweh, by that I mean looking up since I barely remembered it, Ichigo pointlessly battles against an opponent he barely has any personal connection to, and only wins because Ishida pulls a Deus Ex Machina magical weapon out of his ass, a weapon that clearly only exists because Yahweh can basically make whatever the hell he wants happen, and therefore has no actual counters. It's so underwhelming, and yet fights like this are dime a dozen amongst the shonen genre. In fact, I think this is inevitable in any series the mangaka fails to negotiate ending on their own terms. And this is also why I mainly just play video games now. I'd like to thank everyone who's watched all the way to this point, and if you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and maybe even subscribing. And that's all, folks. See you next time.